Okay, very exciting topic. I know we started last time. I honestly could not stop thinking about last class. Like I really was just thinking about it all week. I know I messaged privately with a few of you and I was like, it's just like churning and churning in my head. And I was like reading and studying and thinking. And I was like, you know what? Next class, we just have to really tackle this topic. It's a very big topic, and I think it's on a lot of our minds. Um, I would say before we start, let's dedicate tonight's class to all those who are experiencing real pain and suffering. Um, some people it's loss of life. For some people it's serious health issues. For some people it's, family strife, financial struggle, whatever it is, they should all find healing and true peace. And really, this world should just not know any more suffering. Those are the people at the forefront of our minds tonight. It's
Amen.
also by divine providence that we are just at the beginning of a period called the 3 weeks. It began yesterday. Yesterday was a minor fast, the 17th of Tammuz, and this is a period that continues on for the next 3 weeks until the 9th of Av, which is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. This is a time when the Jewish nation mourns for the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of our holy temple. We observe this time practically by refraining from listening to music. Jewish weddings are not performed during this time. We don't make a shechianu, or, there's different things that we do to kind of minimize our pleasures that we experience during these 3 weeks so that we really can kind of remember that this is a sad time for our people, and our people have been through a lot. On the positive side, we are encouraged to spend time during this period to study about the Holy Temple, to learn about what is it that we lost, that we used to have, and that we will have in the future. The Jewish teachings and belief tell us that there will be a time with the coming of Mashiach where there will be a temple, a third temple in Jerusalem. So studying about that and kind of preparing for that is also part of the observance of this time. So if there's any good time to examine pain and suffering, I think during this time of collective mourning of the Jewish people around the world, it just seems to be appropriate. Just to recap how we got here before we dive in. So last class, we read a segment in the Tanya that after establishing how much happiness and joy are absolutely essential in serving God, we then went on to ask, okay, then how can we maintain happiness in the face of real suffering? When someone's lacking in one of the three main areas that the Talmud describes, life, family, and sustenance, how can the person still maintain happiness? So I want to also remind us what happiness are we talking about, right? Like, what does the Tanya expect us to be doing in terms of happiness? I have a little slide here. Here we go. Yeah. Okay, so chapter 26. Okay, how do we define joy? When we're saying that we're supposed to be maintaining joy in the face of pain and difficulty, what joy are we talking about? See if I can just make this bigger so everyone can see. That's better. Okay, how does the Tanya define joy? This is, I just took a screenshot from the text of the Tanya itself. The Tanya tells us in this chapter, it is impossible to conquer the evil nature with laziness and sluggishness, which stem from sadness and a stone-like dullness of heart. The Tanya tells us that the reason we're required to be joyous is because our life is a struggle. In a good way, we're put in this world to struggle, to work, to make good choices. And it's impossible to be winning at this struggle and making good choices when we're feeling sad. And by sad, specifically, the Tanya means dull, unfeeling, sluggish, heavy, all of those, feelings. Rather, what we should be feeling is alacrity, which derives from joy, meaning an open and responsive heart that's unblemished by any trace of worry and sadness in the world. So we're not saying that we need to be giddy and giggling and laughing all the time, but our heart should be free. Joy is that feeling of knowing that I'm not worried. I know what has to happen is happening, and I know it's okay, and I know it's good, and I know it will be good, and I can live life, and I can feel, and I can experience, and I'm open to feeling different feelings, even as I may be experiencing pain and difficulty. But it doesn't weigh me down and stop me from being able to move along. So now, once we established that, then we said, okay, so now how do I maintain this open heart in the face of struggle? So again, this is what we read last time in the Tanya. Sound advice has been offered by our sages on cleansing one's heart of all sadness and any trace of worry about mundane matters, even a sadness or worry caused by the lack of essentials such as children, health, and livelihood. How is that? This advice is contained in the well-known saying of our sages, just as one recites a blessing for his good fortune, so must he recite a blessing for his misfortune. This is what the Tanya quotes as, this is how. You want to know how you can still be happy and positive in the face of struggles? This idea of blessing God for the misfortune, that should help you understand it. When the Tanya further breaks it down, what it seems to be telling us is that it doesn't mean making blessings necessarily every time something bad happens. But what it's telling us is that when we can recognize that the negativity is coming from God, just like the positivity is coming from God, that's how we can reach the state of joy, even in the face of pain and suffering. I need to be able to recognize that all of it is coming from God.
Hello.
Hello.
May I ask you to come check the bed downstairs?
Sure.
Tell me.
So that's what the Tanya seems to be demanding of us. And this is, I think, where a lot of us got stuck, where people get stuck in general. Meaning the premise of the Tanya is that if I can recognize that even pain, evil, and misfortune is coming from God, then I can maintain my joy in the face of a struggle. And again, not necessarily dancing, but being able to have that open heart, not getting crushed, the ability to move forward, to have that alacrity without letting life's struggles beat us down. So how do we do that? How do we really recognize, believe, and trust that even the worst situations, God forbid, we should never experience them, but when we do encounter them, how can we recognize that this too is coming from God? Right? So many people ask, like, if God is good, how does he do evil? How can I believe in a God that also makes terrible things happen? It's only human to ask. It's a question that humans have asked for years. I actually want to quote a story from the Talmud. There's a very famous sage in the Talmud. His name is Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya. Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya was a tremendous, tremendous scholar, extremely well respected. And what he's famous for is that at some point he lost his faith and he became a non-believer. And there are a lot of discussions in the Talmud about him. How does someone who's such a great sage stop believing? And there's two different opinions as to how he lost his faith. The first one says that Rabbi Elisha was walking and he saw, so just some background, there is a mitzvah in the Torah that if somebody is interested in taking the babies or the eggs of a bird and the mother bird is there, you're not allowed to. If you are interested in the baby birds or in the bird eggs, you must first shoo away the mother bird so that she's not present, and only then you're able to take the babies or the eggs. And there's a lot of different reasons about why it's considered a very big mitzvah. It's one of the two mitzvahs in the Torah that the Torah tells us that one is rewarded with long life for. The other mitzvah being respect of our parents. It's for a different topic, but a different time, but it's a lot of discussion about why these two mitzvahs are put in the same category. But regardless, it's a mitzvah in the Torah. Maybe it's about teaching us sensitivity. Maybe it's about, for various reasons, this is what the Torah commands. So Rabbi Elisha was walking and he saw a little boy climbing up a tree because there was a mother bird and little eggs. And the little boy was climbing up the tree to do this mitzvah. He was trying to chase away the mother bird so that he can take the eggs. And he watched the little boy tumble off the tree and die. And he said, well, if this is what happens while he's doing this mitzvah, I can't believe in this anymore. That's one opinion. The other opinion is Rabbi Elisha's teacher was also a very great sage who was known as one of the 10 martyrs. There are 10 great sages who were tortured to death by the Romans in very, very, very cruel ways. And we recount their stories on Yom Kippur, and on the 9th of Av as well, we tell their stories. And that's in 3 weeks. So they say that Rabbi Elisha was there and he observed as the Romans tortured his own teacher. And it describes graphically what they did to his teacher. And he said when he saw this, also he lost his faith. It's something I think that we can't fully comprehend. I think you have to be on the level of Rabbi Elisha that Rabbi Elisha was to then be able to understand the experience from his perspective. But the bottom line is, it's a question that's been around for a long time. How could a good God make horrible things happen? How can he allow horrible things to happen? How can he allow good people to suffer? How can he allow people to suffer while they're doing a mitzvah? I mean, seriously, somebody was doing something good, something to praise God, and then something bad came to them because of that. I think it's important to also ask another question, which is, why do tragedies and tragic occurrences bother us so much? This is an interesting point. Why are we so disturbed and so hurt when we see innocent little girls die in a flood? When we see, a homeless person sitting and like starving to death in the street? Why is it that we're so bothered by it? And Kabbalah explains that it says God made us in his image. One of the explanations for us being created in God's image is that God implanted, like, there are elements of God's way of being that are reflected in us. Meaning God's creation of life and value of life is something that has been ingrained in his creations, that by our very nature, we value life. And there is something about us, something deep inside our core that can't believe evil, can't handle when evil exists, which is why it's very natural for people to say when they see something really bad happen, well, I can't believe anymore. If my God is letting this happen, I can't believe in God anymore, because there's something deep inside of us that really wants to believe in a very, very good God. Because if he's not good, how could he be God? It's in an interesting twist, a lot of people who say, I lost my faith because I saw X, Y, and Z. If you think about it in a way, it's not a very logical argument. It's kind of like someone saying, I don't understand Einstein's theory of relativity, therefore it must not exist. Either Einstein never existed or the theory is not true. I can't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. Nobody says that, because we understand that there are some things that are beyond our understanding. If I were Einstein, I'd understand the theory. If I was, maybe if this was my major, if this was something that I really focused on, I could understand it. But I'm also able to accept that there are certain things that are beyond my understanding. When it comes to believing in God and having this faith, and at the same time seeing difficult things happen, saying I can't believe in God at that point is really an emotional reaction. It's not a logical reaction, because logically, we should have no problem accepting that there are things that we can't understand. But emotionally, we want to believe. We want to be connected to God. We want to see that his ways are just and positive and pure and good. And that's why we struggle so much when we see that bad things are happening. So how are we supposed to handle these things, and how are we supposed to answer this question, right? That's kind of the big question we're coming to answer tonight. How do I answer the question when I see, or how do I reconcile when I see terrible things happen? How could God let it happen? And I think that before we go into the answer to this, I think there's always a risk in answering this question, because if someone's pain now makes sense to me, if I'm able to give a really good explanation that I walk away from this class and say, okay, I can understand why sometimes God might do terrible things to people. then guess what happens to my compassion? My compassion to others is going to go down. So it's really important when we examine this and when we try to find answers to it, that we also have to kind of promise ourselves that when I encounter someone else's pain, I'm going to forget every explanation and I'm just going to be silent. And when I see someone else going through a difficult time, I just need to look into their eyes, look into their pain, and not stop until they know for certain that they're not alone and that I'm here with them. And the only reason I pursue an answer is really for myself. I want to understand for myself when I encounter difficult things, how do I keep going on in faith when I'm experiencing negativity? But when it comes to someone else's struggles, we have to take all of the reasoning out and we really just have to, reach out to them with compassion and with caring. I think if we're going to break up, we touch upon a lot of this a lot, but I want to kind of revisit and hash it out. I think there's two parts to the answer that the Tanya was explaining, and I want to separate them. I think that number one, the Tanya is expecting us to recognize a fact that because we are not God, we will never truly understand God's ways. But we really, really need to let that sink in. I believe it was the Kutzker Rebbe used to say, a God that I understand is not the God I want to believe in. I want to have a God who's higher than me. If I understand everything that God does, he's not God. Yes, Lorraine.
So I think every single thing you're saying makes absolute sense. And you still can leave space for all the human error that we are now hearing about. And then you give someone like me that is not wired to believe that God would perpetrate evil, because killing children is evil in any religion, in anyone's mind, period. All of a sudden, we are coming up with all this human error, which now explains how these little girls perished. Did God cause the storm? 200%. But now, with all the facts that we're hearing, humans could have also saved those little girls. So
Right.
I just need to say the
No, I'm
that
happy.
we're
No, I need you
missing.
to hold on to that because I want to get to it. I want us to break this down, and then I want to revisit that question because you're right. We do need to answer. Where does human error come in? Where does human bad choice come in? Right? And those those are very important pieces. Like, did God build the gas chambers? Did God build Hamas's tunnels? Like, it's all the same question. If we're to put God on trial now, we want to say, God, were you there? Were you there when the 6 million perished? What were you doing? What were you doing when those people were sitting in the tunnels? What were you doing when that river overflowed? What are you doing when does God have a threshold? If God is giving free choice to people, is there a point at which God says, all right, at this point I intervene? Now it's no longer, you're making too many bad choices. Now I'm going to jump in. So what you're asking is very, very valid, but I think it's first really important to recognize and to internalize the fact that God and humans are on two very different planes. And we cannot, we define reality by what we see, but we must remember that the reality that we see is limited by my humanness. I read a beautiful article. I don't think I've heard of this author before. Let me see, I wrote his name down. His name is Shmuel Pollan. He was, talking about this, and he gave an interesting analogy. He said, imagine you have a group of children who decide to play a game of basketball. There's one child in the group who doesn't hear very well. So a ball is handed to this child. He puts it down on the floor and kicks it really hard to the other side of the court. Now, obviously, the other kids turn to him and start screaming at him, like, what in the world are you doing? And he says, what do you mean? I just scored us a goal. They say, no, you didn't. You didn't score anything. You got us a penalty. And now the other team has control of the ball. The kid's confused. Like, what's going on here? What was the problem? Well, this child was playing soccer and the other kids were playing basketball, right? They're playing two different games. And when you're playing a different game than the people around you, when you're playing a different game, when you're speaking a different language than the people around you, then there's going to be things that you cannot understand about each other. Now, he was drawing a parallel. He said, if we had to compare the game that we're playing versus the game that God's playing, he called it, we're playing the game, My Perfect Life. Every day, we strive to have good health, good finances, a good marriage, or as close as we can get, even if we know we're not going to reach perfection. We are really trying to have a good and reasonable life. Now, when suffering happens, we get upset because our game is being ruined. Meanwhile, God's also playing the game. God's game, he called it, is the perfect story. I'm playing the game, My Perfect Life. God's game is the perfect story. It's kind of like, imagine like God is recording this movie, a 7,000-year-long movie. And the story is full of drama and full of heroes and full of villains and victory and catastrophe and sadness and joy. And he's doing this, and we are right there in one scene where we're seeing things and we're experiencing things. And yes, they are evil, and we experience them as painful and difficult and evil. But we have to recognize that I don't have the full story. And that's a definition of faith. What does faith mean? If I can understand everything about God and why God does it, then is he God? God is running this world, and no matter how much I try and how smart I am and how much I study and how much I, seek to understand, there is a point that I will not understand, because what's my job here? My job, I'm a character in this, in this movie. God gives me prompts to follow. The prompts are the mitzvahs. He says, these are the things you need to do. Sometimes I understand why I'm doing them. Sometimes I don't. Yes, I'm seeing things and I'm experiencing things that are difficult, but I don't get the full picture. My role may not be to save the day. My role may be to help a single person, to be someone's support, to be someone's shoulder to lean on. My role might be to guide my soul through this experience, because spiritually, this is something that my soul needs to go through. And I need to just hang in there and help my soul through this experience, and obviously nurturing my soul at this time through doing the things that are spiritually beneficial for my soul. The one thing I need to remember is that I don't have the full picture. And at the same time, I was chosen to be in this, if we're going to call it a movie. I was hand selected with my specific background, my unique talents and abilities, and I'm here for a reason, in the spot that I'm supposed to be in. And my job now, I try to understand, but whether I do or I don't understand, my job is to do what the director is telling me I need to do, to add light, to add goodness. And there will be a time that we'll be able to look back and see the whole story. But I need to accept that I cannot understand God's ways. And Sarah, before I get to your question, if we want to go back in history, as early as Moses, what did Moses, after the sin of the golden calf, Moses asked God, and Moses heard about the punishment that the Jews are going to have. What did Moses ask God? Actually, I have a slide for it so we can see. We can just see the words inside of what Moses said to God and what God responds to him. Let me see. There we go. Let me get a little bigger. Here, this is a text from Exodus. Sorry, I just want to make it so we can see. All right, he says, this is what Moses said to God. He said, oh, let me behold your presence. God, let me see you. And the commentaries say, what was Moses saying? He said, God, I want to understand. This makes no sense to me. You just took these people out of Egypt. You gave us the Torah. Now we're in the desert, and whoops, just like that, you're going to now keep us in the desert for another 40 years? Make it make sense. I don't understand it. And what did God respond to him? And God answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, God's name, and the grace that I want, that I grant, and the compassion that I show. And then God continued, but you cannot see my face, for a human being may not see me and live. This is Moses. This is Moses, who was the greatest of all men, who stood there at Sinai, giving us the Torah from God. He had direct dialogue. He is someone who actually spoke to God, and God spoke to him. I mean, he had the most tremendous revelations. And yet God said to him, Moses, you need to know that with all of your greatness, you're still a limited human being. And there are some things that you will not understand, because I run this world. I am God and you are human. So another story about Moses as well. It happened a few times, but there's another story where at the very end of Moshe's life, when he wasn't able to, he really wanted to enter Israel and God didn't let him. And then God said, you know, I will let you see, I want you to see the future leaders of the Jewish people. He wanted Moses to see that all his efforts weren't in vain. You know, he wanted to see that, yes, the Jews will enter Israel and they will have good life and they're going to have leadership and things, you know, life will continue for the Jewish people. And it says that he showed Moses all the Jewish leaders until the end of days. And as Moses is watching this vision, he sees Rabbi Akiva. And Moshe was very fascinated by Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had a very interesting life story. He was, I mean, until 40 years old, he didn't even know how to read. He grew up as a very, poor and simple shepherd. At 40 years old, he married Rachel. She convinced him to go study. Ultimately, he went from being an illiterate guy at age of 40 to a man with 24,000 students, who's one of the greatest teachers of Torah. It actually says that Moshe was able to see that Rabbi Akiva was going to be able to understand concepts in Torah that he himself, Moshe himself, was not able to understand. So Moshe says, wow, God, obviously I'm paraphrasing, but I love this guy. He's amazing. So show me what will be with him. What will the end of his life look like? You know, the end of Rabbi Akiva's life looked like? Rabbi Akiva was one of those 10 martyrs that we read about on Yom Kippur. And God showed him. And Moshe saw that at the end of Rabbi Akiva's life, a Roman general or a Roman officer stood there with metal combs and scraped his skin off until he died. This was the end of Rabbi Akiva's life. And Moshe's watching this and he starts crying. And the words he says in Hebrew are, Zu Torah v'zu schara. God, this is Torah and this is the reward? Seriously? This is what Rabbi Akiva is going to get for this incredible life, devotion, and dedication that I just saw? And what words does God use to speak to him? God tells him, for those who speak Hebrew, the words God says are shtok, which in modern Hebrew is translated as basically, shut up, be quiet. No one's asking you. He says, Moshe, be quiet. Kach Allah bidati. This is what I desire. This is my plan. This is part of my plan, kind of like I told him before. There are parts of my plan that you will never, ever be able to understand. I think that before we can start talking about the second part that the Tanya mentions, which is the incredible closeness that spiritually can be sometimes experienced during pain, we first have to recognize and accept that I am a limited human being and there's a limit to my understanding. And only when I can accept that, then I can move on to have faith. Because if I expect to understand every single thing that God does, look, I can beseech God. I can cry out to God. Jewish leaders have always cried out to God. We had, Abraham, when he saw the Sodom and Gomorrah. I always mix up the English, but in Hebrew it's Sodom and Gomorrah. When he saw that these cities are going to be destroyed, Abraham cried out to God and he says, please, why are you doing this? Can't you save them? Can't you care for them? At the same time, his faith wasn't shaken. He called out, he begged, but he also had a certain acceptance and understanding that if this is what God decrees, then this is something that I need to accept. It's beyond my understanding. And I think that that's probably the first piece that we need to get in all of this. Before we get into the deeper part of Tanya, really to understand that God's ways are mysterious and will always be. And as much as we seek to understand, we need to accept the limitation of our humanity. Sarah, now I'm going to ask you to share if it's still relevant.
Yes, it is. Okay, so faith and hope in my head are very future tense. Yes, it could be past and present, but in my head I'm hearing future. Okay, hold on to that thought for a second. Let's use your movie analogy. I get it. I have a role to play. This is my part. I'm understanding all of that. And then you're telling me 7,000 as in from creation, right? We're at 5785 years in the Jewish calendar right now.
Right.
To me, that feels very suddenly very limited. Like, is there no 7,001? Like, are we going to go to 14,000? Like, I don't mean to sound like ridiculous, but if the world is going to end in a couple of like 100 years, why? Like, for what?
So we're actually told very clearly that the limit to Olam Hazeh, to the physical world as we know it, is at 7,000 years. At 7,000 years, Olam Haba begins. The era, the Messianic era, which is everlasting. So no, the world's not going to cease to exist, but the world as we know it will no longer be the way we know it. It will be transformed into a much higher, better, more spiritual world. We have the ability to hasten the coming of Mashiach and make it happen today. So we don't have to wait till the year 7,000. But
Right.
so to speak, if all else fails, that's the absolute deadline that's been given.
Right. So now I want to shift gears and talk about how do you say it? The six the six remembrances.
Okay.
There are concepts where we are supposed to believe with full faith that certain things will happen, and I'm good with that as a future tense, way of thinking about things. And in a way, I guess from my perspective, I feel like I'm I don't want to say minimizing myself, but I'm looking at big picture, if that makes more sense. To me, it just feels a little bit more of rationalizing things and sort of saying, like your Einstein example, I don't know. It's beyond me. And I'm just a teeny tiny little speck, as opposed to thinking of things that in my world, in my view, in my eyes, in my understanding, yes, limited, understood, but like nothing is going to make sense. I get it. There's opportunities to connect, and these are the things that we are supposed to try to take out of this. But
so give me more specific examples. You said the 6 remembrances.
no, I'm just saying fundamentally, like there's foundations.
Are you talking about maybe the 13 principles of faith?
Yes, that too. Sorry.
Oh. 6 remembrances are 6 things that we're supposed to remember every day, like that God took us out of Egypt and that Amalek tried to set up with us in the desert. The 13 principles of faith are what Maimonides outlines as the fundamentals of Jewish belief and faith. That
So
we
6
believe in one God and we believe in,
Right.
reward and punishment and all that.
And Mashiach will come.
Yes.
So I view the 6 remembrances as past tense, and the 13 principles are sort of future. In my head, that's just how it makes sense. That's how I can make it make sense for me.
Okay.
So again, I don't want to use the word minimizing, but it feels like I'm missing such a big point. I can look big picture and very macro. Your helicopter over the forest example that you gave once upon a time, that I get. I don't know how that looks at me. You're right. I don't understand it. So what am I supposed to do with this not making sense? Do you hear what I'm saying?
I'm not sure I really understand the question, meaning you're saying you can understand it in your head, but practically you don't understand, you don't.
Right. I can understand it big picture. I don't understand, and I like to use the
I mean,
word
I think the
accountable.
real test comes with when we encounter issues, we encounter struggles, you know, we can all say all the right things and then we wake up in the morning and, you know, we check the bank account and it doesn't look like what we expected. And oh my goodness, I need to do something. Or, you know, we read something in the news and something happens that we're like, what, how in the world did this happen? How does God allow this to happen? You know, God willing, everyone here should only have good things and good occurrences happen, but things happen. And when we internalize these principles of faith and and you know, specifically here, this idea that God runs the world and I can't fully comprehend it, when that's internalized within us, it affects how we approach each of these situations. Are these situations going to knock us down? Are they going to knock the wind out of us and make us unable to function and unable to move forward? Or are we going to be able to move on, take the time, mourn, cry, and still live what the Tanya defines as a joyous life with an open heart, open to experiences, open to feelings.
I hear. Okay.
Meaning it's theoretically, in our heads, it's theoretically when we study it until it's practical. I have a clip, so I'm going to show a short clip from Ditsa Or that we discussed in the WhatsApp chat for firstly, by raise of hand, how many people watched that clip? The interview with the mother of the hostage. Harriet did? Okay, good. So we're not going to be, it's not going to be too much of a repeat. I was going to show a few minute clip. I found it fascinating. But one of the things she said when they asked her, you know, if you could have given yourself a message like 30 years ago, if you could have told something to yourself, like what message would you give your younger self? And I was fascinated by what she said. She said, something to the effect of, I would have told myself that I need to work more on my faith. Because I feel like if I had had stronger faith proactively, I would have handled the situation much better. And I mean, she's handling the situation in incredible ways. I mean, she's fascinating to listen to, but she feels that she had to work so hard on her faith in a tough situation. And she kind of wishes that she had invested more in this before the crisis so that she had more tools in her toolbox to handle it. So I think that's a little bit like what you're saying, like faith in many ways is theoretical, it's ideas, it's stuff, you know, but practically speaking, when push comes to shove, we encounter faith all the time. And the more prepared we are, the more connected we are to the faith, to our faith, the better we can react and the better we can ride the waves. You know, it says about Abraham. Abraham was, you know, the first Jew, this great believer, incredible guy. He did, you know, passed all of his tests in flying colors. What does it say when Abraham's wife, Sarah, passed away? It's actually the first, I believe it's the first expression in the Torah of emotion, of like raw emotion. It says that Abraham cried for Sarah. It's a very powerful, you know, emotional phrase. He sat and he cried for his wife. We've never heard that concept in the Torah before this. And you would think, wait, Abraham, this man of faith, like you would think that at that moment he would say, everything God does is for the good and, you know, move on. What's my next task? And the commentaries explain that it specifically says this phrase. God put it into the Torah to teach us that, yes, I created you as spiritual beings. I created you and I expect you to have faith, but I also created you with a heart. I expect you to have and express emotion. And it's not a contradiction. His wife passed away. It was time to mourn. He cried for her. The Torah says that when someone close dies, a person said Shiva. You're supposed to mourn for 7 days. And yet, we don't stop our lives. We go through the mourning practices, we cry, we express our grief, and we also keep going. And it's interestingly enough, in a Torah scroll, for the word that says that Abraham cried, I think it's Vayivakeha, I think that's the word, is written, the letter Kaf in that word is written in small. It would be interesting if I actually had an image of it. In an actual Torah scroll, one of the letters of the word of Abraham crying is supposed to be written smaller than the average letter. And the message in that is Yes, of course he cried. At the same time, it was a controlled grief. He didn't let the grief take over him. He was in control of his grief. He took the time to cry, to mourn, and he also was able to accept that this is part of God's plan, and now it's time for me to put one foot in front of the other and to keep going. That's, there's, okay, I just got a message that I need to finish up quickly because I have a baby who's not feeling well. So I want to, I want to quickly go through the next two pieces very quickly. Firstly, what we mentioned last time, and I want to say it again, the Tanya says, on top of this, once I can accept that I don't understand everything that happens, there's another piece, and that is even deeper. That is that I know that what I see, like we said, I see one vision, God sees the big picture. I need to know that there's a spiritual experience that's happening at the same time that I am not aware of, or at least my physical conscious mind is not aware of. There's a spiritual experience that's also happening. And God, being a good God, only does good. Again, I think the Talmud says this very clearly, no evil comes from God. So where is God in all of this evil? When I firmly believe that I don't understand God's ways, I need to also believe that on some level, on some spiritual level that I don't understand, this too is good. And the Tanya says even more so, sometimes a good that is so high, it is so holy, it's too high for this world. And the way that it's expressed in the physical world is as the opposite of good. Meaning just because something appears to be really bad in this world, it doesn't mean that on every level it's actually bad. On the contrary, I need to know that on the highest spiritual level, this is real good. This is closeness. God is hand choosing and selecting me for this very specific experience. And, like the example I think I heard from Rabbi Yitzchak Shachat said, he said, a child goes with his parent to the doctor to get a needle. And the kid is kicking and screaming, and the mom is holding the kid down, and the doctor injects the needle. And the kid is hating the mom, and hating the doctor, and hating the office. And yet at the same time, the child turns around and hugs his mom and turns to his mom for comfort. Because on some deep level, the kid knows that even though I hate my mom for doing this to me, I know that my mom is the true source of comfort, and she's the only one who can comfort me. And you know what? One day when the child grows up as an adult, the child goes back to the doctor and voluntarily, gets the vaccinations and whatever it is that they need, because now they understand it differently. But we need to, having faith in difficult times is knowing that, yes, it's painful. Yes, it hurts. I hate it. And at the same time, I know that God is a loving God and he's putting me through it. And he's the only one who can help me get through it. I was planning to show these two clips. This is where I'm conflicted because I have a crying baby that I really need to tend to. And so that will have to be the priority. But
100%.
I encourage you, if you have not yet listened to this interview with Ditza Or, I highly, highly recommend listening to it. It will be, I cried my entire way through it. And I feel like hearing from a woman whose child is currently, till this moment, being tortured by Hamas in Gaza. And one line I'll quote from her, she said that when she couldn't deal with it. And her kid said, Mom, like, what, like, she said, how am I supposed to calm down when I know my child is in the hand of Hamas? My beautiful, innocent child is being held by the world's most terrible beasts right now. And she said, her daughter said to her mom, he's not in the hands of Hamas. He's in the hands of Hashem. And she said that changed it for her. And of course, she's every moment she says she doesn't do anything else now except advocate for her son and fight for him and think about him. But she keeps reminding herself, he's in the hands of God. If God didn't want this to happen, for whatever reason that we can never, ever understand, if God didn't agree for this to happen, this wouldn't happen. And if God wanted reality to be different, in a split second, he could be sitting at home right now being surrounded by his family. And for whatever reason that we cannot possibly comprehend, this is his will. Like God said to Moses, you don't see the full picture. And yet God is compassionate. You know, he gives us a time to mourn, and he offers us ways to connect to him and to, you know, pray and to recite Psalms. And it's this, you know, it's not black and white, but it is like he gives us a lifeline and then he puts us through it. It's like the mom brings her child for the shots and then also hugs the child so tightly and says, I'm sorry, I know you could never understand why this has to happen right now. We will revisit those clips next week. I'm sorry that I have to go. Let's continue the conversation. Have a wonderful
In
week.
2 weeks?
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I will be away next week, God willing. In 2 weeks on the 28th, we will reconvene. Please bring back all your questions and all your thoughts, and I look forward.
Have a great rest of your trip, Deanie. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Hope your baby's better soon.
I hope so.
Thanks.